You're listening to the Hunt Suburbia podcast. I'm your host, Pat Guyette. Big bucks I've been dreaming often, every night till I'm in a coffin. Vermont woods to the burbs of Boston, I'm looking for a tree to get lost in. Crisp mornings, little dust in the snow. Quality time, just me and my bow. Fall evenings, I know just where to go for some quality times for me and my bow. It's just me and my bow. All right, this week we're interviewing Brian Visco. He was on a previous podcast. We talked about how he got caught up in bow hunting and to the point where, he felt burnt out and he almost wanted to quit. He felt like he was going to quit and he got depressed on hunting and he didn't like it anymore. That led him into becoming a competition archer, shooting competitively and climbing all the way up to the number 9th ranked U.S. competitive archer. Really great archer. He also builds his own bowstrings, so he loves bow and arrow setups and build outs and gets really, techie and into the nitty gritty of your bow setup. He analyzes my bow, tells me what's wrong with it. He recommends how I can fix things to tune it up. And he's going to tell you guys what he thinks is the best bow and arrow setup to hunt deer. I hope you guys enjoy this one. Here he is, Brian Visco. All right, back with another episode of Hunt Suburbia. Sitting here with Brian Visco.
Hey.
What's up, Brian? And we're going to talk, some people have been reaching out and asking about, let's do a bow and arrow build out, nerding out podcast. Sure. Talk about what the best builds are for shooting accurate arrows and killing deer.
Right.
Now, Brian is unique because he's a really good competition archer. And what were you, top 9 in the U.S. at one point, right?
Yeah, I cracked the top 10, was it half a dozen years or so ago. That was about as close as I got. But I was into it pretty heavy. And then just got out of it. But still, I like to think I've learned with the people I've shot with and hung around with. I've learned an awful lot about setup and tuning and what works, what doesn't, what's gimmick, what isn't. Some of the best in the world. I think I just posted something the other day. Tim Gillingham from Gold Tip did a big thing about arrows and spine and dynamic spine and all this weight forward and all of that.
Now, even though you've been out of it for the competition part for a few years,
a while,
I would be willing to guess that you could still shoot an apple off someone's head at 30 yards. Huh?
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in how I've been trying to put a indoor bow together actually in the last month. Eric Griggs sent a bow for me to play with because I told him I was going to try.
What do you mean about indoor bow?
Indoor, what one would think is an indoor target bow would typically be a little longer and axle to axle. Your string angle isn't as acute as these real short little bows. Less poundage. Higher holding weight, so you don't have as much let off in some of them. There are some guys shooting really high let off, but not advisable. But he sent me one, and I have been trying to get back to it. I'm not happy with how I'm progressing. It is. I am getting older, and the level of competition now is so hard. We're gonna try, but
how old are you?
I'm gonna be 52.
Okay.
And
but you're in prime for hunting. Well, I like to bring up the fact that there's a couple of sports, maybe not prime, but you're not.
I'm still good to hunt.
Oh yeah, it's not like if you're trying to play basketball right now.
Yeah.
52, you're done.
Not gonna happen.
But golf, you can get better until you're 70.
Sure.
Some people.
Sure.
Archery, I feel like, can be the same, shooting wise.
Yeah,
in hunting, you can get a great buck when you're 70.
Sure. It's just the level of competition now in outdoor feeder or indoor or outdoor 3D, ASA, whether it's known distance or not. These guys are tough. I mean, everybody knows Levi Morgan, Jeff Hopkins, Jack Wallace, all of them. And then indoor, it's...
Everybody except me.
Yeah. Local, Braden Gelantine, one of the best in the world, shoots for Matthews. Dave Cousins from Maine. Then you got all the guys from overseas. And Jesse Broadwater. And,
now, are most of these guys hunters as well?
Of those
like...
of those target guys I just mentioned, no.
Yeah, because all they do is they only practicing to get good at that, right?
Right. And Braden's a hunter, but his job is target archery. So is Dave Cousins. So is Jesse Broadwater. I mean, they dabble, but they don't have the time to.
So that's probably why you didn't reach their level at target archery, right? Because you love hunting too.
I do. I had what I believe is the best coach in the world coaching me while I was really trying. He actually got Braden started when he was really little, Terry Wonderly. Amazing hunter. I have some pictures to show you. He's in his, I don't know exactly how old. Nobody knows how old Terry is. He's probably in his 80s. He's killed over 65 Pope and Young bucks, giants, all with the bow.
Yeah.
And his first love was 3D, and I went to him to help me to get better at target and FIDA. He is working with, I think, one guy in New York and Sean Roberts. I don't know if you know Sean from Connecticut. Terry's his coach. He's starting to shoot a little indoor target. He's a hell of a hunter, real good 3D shooter. I think he won IBO World a few years ago, semi-pro. I'm trying to get back to it a little. We'll see. But hunting-wise, I can still do it. Hunting-wise, I can still do it.
So as a target shooter, I'm sure there's got to be a lot of things that are just natural, fundamentals of shooting a bow that translate over to deer hunting, right? Like if you're a great target shooter, are you going to be putting on great shots on deer when they're in range or what?
Well,
what are the big differences?
I think, one of the arguments is anybody can shoot a 3D target, but put a living, breathing animal in front of them and they fold up like an accordion. Mm-hmm. Some of that's true. But my philosophy has been, and I've preached for years now, in the off season for a lot of these guys to join an indoor league and get into some competition, because the closest you're going to get to trying to get that pump going,
the adrenaline,
is if you get into any, these fun head-to-head matches, or just shooting against yourself, trying to beat your personal best. Indoor archery is, it's a game of, not even inches. The 10 ring is the size of a dime. To put 60 arrows consistently in that spot, no wind, and you have nothing to deal with except yourself. If you can't do it there, how are you going to do it when you're out in the elements?
So what is a typical competition archery shoot? Is it 60 arrows?
There's a few different rounds. Most of them now are going towards what they call the Vegas 3-spot or the Lancaster round, where it's one arrow in each spot. It's either 30 arrows, 45 arrows, or 60 arrows. And you have to, now it's to the point where you have to shoot them all in the 10 ring. And then just
all 60?
All of them.
In the bullseye.
Just so that you can get to the big show, to get to the shoot off.
Get out of here.
And keep going until somebody misses.
And what's the distance?
20 yards.
All right, so 20 yards, all
18 meters or 20 yards.
All 60 into the 10 ring, and that's the size of a dime?
It's getting to that. I mean, if you shoot what they call the Vegas round, it's about the size of a quarter, maybe a little bigger than a quarter.
Wow.
A little bigger than a quarter.
Yep.
And you have kids that are 15, 16 years old doing this now. George Riles has a group of kids down in, I think, Georgia, called the Hornets. He turns out more kids in their mid-teens shooting clean rounds. It's unbelievable.
Now, is it after every shot you remove the arrow?
No, you'll shoot 3 and then step back. The next line will step up, shoot 3, and then everybody goes and scores.
But you can shoot 3 into the dime size.
It's 3 spots on one target, so
Okay,
you're not
all right.
smashing your arrows.
All right,
You
yep,
can shoot a
yep.
single spot, but your chances of a glance out or ruining your arrows, and
right.
arrows are expensive.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
all new to
so,
me. I
yeah.
know nothing about
Yeah.
competition archery, so I'm
It's-
sure a lot of the listeners don't either.
It's I've been in a lot of indoor leagues over the years. My old place, Teepee, Woburn Sportsman Association in Bedford. I'm sure Reedy's has them, Big Al's, Bay Path, Townsend, Tingsboro. Everybody has usually a winter indoor league. Now with COVID, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of places aren't having them. You might find a tournament here or there, and it's for all levels. I mean, you can do novice, advanced, open, seniors. There are a lot of different classes. Bow hunter, where you're restricted by your equipment. So you're competing amongst your peers. You don't have a guy with a full-blown target bow shooting against somebody with a hunting bow.
What are the differences?
So differences would be your atypical target bow would be typically a longer front stabilizer, usually some back weight for counterbalance, a sight that may have or may not have magnification. Most of your target guys are going to shoot the fattest arrow they can, that they can get to shoot properly.
Why is that?
Line breaker. A lot will call it cheating, but if it's allowed,
So if it's on the line, then
just has to touch the line to get the next score value.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Isn't that just a fatter,
it's a fatter diameter. It's
a fatter head, a fatter practice tip?
Well, the actually will be a glue-in tip, so it's the same size.
Okay.
Now in FIDA, you can't use anything bigger than like a 23 series arrow. Everything else you can use a 27. It's almost a half inch. It's big, but they're harder. Sometimes they're harder to get to group, so it's a lot of work. And then your hunter guys that will shoot in these competitions they'll bring their hunting bow, screw-in tips, the regulations of the equipment. They're pretty spelled out. You can't move your sight during the match. 5 pins, 1 pin, whatever. You can't have magnification. Your vanes have to be a certain length. You have to have a screw-in tip. There's all these little, depending on the class. Good times, good fun. You have a few organizations in the state. You have State Archery Association of Massachusetts, SAM, and then you have MFA, Mass Field Archery Association. So a couple of organizations statewide. You can shoot at clubs every weekend, usually, again, without COVID. And then at the end of the year, see how you stack up, state or nationals, the New England sectionals, whatever.
Now, is there anybody that hunts with a glue-in tip? I would imagine the only difference is that you can change out from field points to your broadheads, screwing in and
Sure.
out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've always...
Is there any other advantage to...
The glue-in tips?
Yeah.
Just they're more consistent in weight. If you get that crazy with weighing every single tip, every insert, every vein, if you really want to geek out that much about your arrows, which a lot of guys do. I've been building my own arrows, God, a long time. I don't trust anybody. I want them my way. And I imagine we'll get into that.
Yeah,
a little
definitely.
But guys say, what's the difference between a practice arrow and a hunting arrow in a hunting bow situation? And I've always said the only difference is what's on the end of the arrow. Your hunting arrows are what you're going to hunt with. If you're practicing, you don't have a broadhead on. That's the only difference.
Yep.
You never want to shoot, these arrows I'm just going to practice with and these I'm going to hunt with if they're not exactly the same, because your different nocks, your different veins, your different spine, excuse me, different length. All of those things will affect you sighting the bow in, and then you switch the subtlest little change of your arrow, change the impact and the adjustments you've made for it being sighted in.
Yep.
You can't expect the same results. So I've always said, buy the best arrow you can afford, and when it's time for hunting, screw you, take your field points off, put your broadheads on. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what is the best type of arrow that you can afford? Is it a brand? Is it what's the most important characteristic of the arrow?
I mean, there's so many companies out there now. I mean, you have obviously Easton, has been around forever. Gold Tip, Black Eagle. There's a bunch out there. One of the most important components of a good arrow shaft, even though there are other differences, is the straightness tolerance. You could go to Walmart and buy gold tips that are, 0.009. They're just awful. They're just horrible.
What does that mean? 0.009.
0.009 would be thousandths of straightness over a 28-inch shaft. And so there's a lot of inconsistency there. They're just not very straight over 28 inches. I mean, they'll work.
So what would be a straighter arrow?
0.0015.
Okay.
You talk.
So the closest you get to zero is the straightest.
Yeah, exactly. So like a Gold Tip Hunter Pro, or some of the higher end Easton or Black Eagle shafts.
Do they say it on the box?
Some do, some don't, and it will be depending on the grade. The grade. Every company will have like good, better, best. And if for me, I've always said, get the best that you can afford, and go with that. It's what's doing all the work. So
yeah.
Don't skimp on your arrows and your broadheads ever.
Okay.
That's the meat and potato.
All right, quick announcement. Heron Hill Winery is back. They really appreciated what we did for them last year, the first 4 months of the podcast. I appreciate what they did for us, which was give us a little bit of money to pay for the equipment that we use for this podcast. And if you enjoy this podcast, you want to see it keep going, what we need to see is y'all supporting the sponsors. So support Heron Hill Winery. If you're buying wine, don't go down to the store. You can do it on heronhill.com. Order whatever you want. They got a wide array of wines, and it's free shipping for anything that's 6 bottles or more. So you really can't beat that. And if you're a first-time buyer, use code HS5 for Hunt Suburbia 5, and you'll get an additional 5% on the first buy. After that, it's going to revert back to just what their volume discounts are. But every time you order, we're going to get credit for it. And that's going to help us keep a long-term sponsor happy, keep producing amazing content for you guys week after week. We're going to get better video equipment eventually. We're going to expand what we're doing for content. So it's not just the podcast, but if you love the podcast and you love wines, or your wives or your girlfriends love wines, somebody around you does, get it for great gift. Use code HS5 at checkout. If you're a first-time buyer, if you're repeating as a buyer, just go on there and order up, and we're going to get credit for it. And I really appreciate you guys supporting the sponsors. They appreciate it. Heron Hill, the official wine of the Hunt Suburbia podcast. Go to www.heronhill.com and use code HS5 for an additional 5% off your first purchase. If you're going back as a repeat buyer, you'll get their volume discounts. And just make sure your first time you're using code HS5 so that they know that we sent you. Thanks for the support. So as we're talking about that, let's dissect mine.
Sure.
Tell everybody what my arrow is.
Right.
And
so we get a blackout, which is, pardon my ignorance too, I know it's mostly within the Bass Pro and Cabela's line of their version of a carbon arrow.
Yep.
It's a 400 spine. I don't know what the tolerance is on this. Looks like a Grim Reaper broadhead with an outsert.
Yep.
And you got some blazer veins.
Why are you laughing at that part?
No, I just know it's a Grim Reaper. But the outsert,
yeah.
You've got quite a bit of weight up in here, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, see, actually that looks like what would look like a gold tip knock, but I'm sure it isn't.
Well, it says gold tip on the vein, on the veins there.
It does. So blackout, why would that? That's kind of weird. Unless I'm just ignorant to maybe gold tip is producing these for blackout.
Yep,
You have
maybe.
to pardon me. I have been out of the archery industry itself for just a little bit, so they change so damn fast. Excuse me. Decent shaft. Yeah. I see a little bit of markings on your veins here, which means
what does that tell you?
your rest is not dropping properly.
Mm-hmm.
You are not. It is not getting out of the way fast enough, and
Let's look at the rest.
that's two reasons here. I'm gonna guess. Okay, so
It's still cocked too. You can see.
it is, yeah. So this right here, the good old ripcord. The internals of the ripcord,
You see, I gotta glue that felt back down too.
yeah, I mean, and it's probably, some of the stripes we're seeing on your vein is from contact, and that happens a couple reasons. When a lot of your shops will set these bows up, you want these cable-driven style rests
Yep.
that you tie into the down cable. They need to engage to their full, their full amount at the last inch of your draw length. If they engage prior to that, what ends up happening is it's retarding the timing of that bottom cable. It's making it so tight that it's throwing off the synchronizing of your top and bottom cam, and it throws off the ability for this to drop fast enough. It also causes your arrow to come out in a porpoise, so it will dive, and usually that's when you get your vein contact. So you see that, and then you have here a knocking loop, which everybody should be familiar with. But what you don't have is a little bit of a tie-in underneath. So that could be why you're getting some stripes on your veins too, is when you draw back, because the shorter bows have such an acute string angle, you get pinch. And when you get that pinch on there, it puts a little bit of a bend on the arrow.
Okay.
So when it comes out, it's a little harder to release itself from the two knots of the knocking loop, and it slows it down. That affects a porpoise, and then you get contact on the rest. Ways that that you would fix that you would first make sure your timing's right, then take your rest, make sure the length of that cord is the right length, not too short.
And that's all based on your draw length.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So like if you were to lose a draw stop or something like that, or your draw length were to change, or your cables or strings were to stretch, it would affect your draw length, and hence now you're drawing back further than you were previously, and that affects the length of the cord. It all has to work together.
And that might have happened this year. This year, Jerry's installed that kisser button. I didn't have that before.
Yep.
And so now I'm drawn back always to the same spot. And if I remember correctly, I'm drawing a little bit less than what I used to.
Before
I was drawing back and kind of anchoring back here. And it's maybe an inch further.
Yeah, so I mean, anchor point is very important, part of your form. Excuse me, sorry. The thing with kisser button, and when I owned my shop, we actually, and this will go against a lot of people's thought, we would go and try and talk people out of a kisser button. And here's why is, and again, our theory, what we believed, was once the kisser button was in the corner of your mouth, you thought you were at full draw and anchoring the same.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys would go down the tip and the string would go past the tip of their nose. Well, when you're aiming down on something, other than bending at the waist, when you're aiming down at something, that string, your main string, will slide further on along the side of your nose. And hence what ends up happening is you're looking through your peep differently than you are when you're at level ground. we would teach people to go with the string on the tip of the nose, and it can't move then. You would anchor properly using the bones in your jaw with your hand, with the tip of this nose touching the string.
Mm-hmm.
Now your distance from your anchor to the center of your peep can't change. Whereas with a kisser, you get dependent on it, and as soon as it's in the corner of your mouth, oh, there I am.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there you are. But now if you're using a big peep and a big your optic, if it's a big housing, oh, there I am, and the pins are in the middle. Well, now you're not centered on center on center. You're looking through the bottom of your peep, the top of your optic, and now you're going to hit high or low or whatever it is. This is a reason why a lot of guys can't explain how did I miss that shot low, and then they go back home and shoot, and they're right on the money. Well, it's because your string slid down the side of your nose, and you were looking through, different.
So you recommend, instead of having a kisser button,
You could have a kisser button, but
only use it if you're on flat.
no. And you can use it when you're in the stand, but if you're not using it in conjunction with the string on the tip of your nose, that should be your number one anchor, I believe. You'll see all your target arches, I would have to say 90+% of them, if you look at their form, the tip of their nose is the string barely touches. You really don't want to have a lot of facial contact. Veins touching your cheek, hitting your beard.
Oh, I would imagine not,
whatever.
yeah.
It's definitely going to throw off left and right. As it is, we're fighting with the torque we're applying to the grip anyway. So
do you find that guys with huge chins or huge cheeks aren't good archers?
No. In fact, you look at some archers that will, literally push with their nose. Their nose is just pushed right into their face, and they're still, their hammer's out on the circuit. They're just fantastic archers.
Yeah.
But they do it. It's exact every single time.
Yep.
So, for me, and the way we would set up somebody up and teach would be, absolutely perfect draw length to where they're comfortable. Tip of the nose on the string is, I believe, is your most consistent way to get a shot you can do shot to shot. Yeah.
Now, it's funny because a couple guys I have in here that are brand new to bow hunting that I have in to tell their stories. John Joya comes to mind. While he was hunting this year for the first time with his bow, he bought a bow and practiced, and he lived in the city. He practiced at like 10, 15 yards, is the most he could with this tiny little piece of concrete property that he was shooting in the city.
Yeah.
But he got out into a stand on the first day of hunting season, and he didn't realize that you should even have an arrow nocked. He had his arrow still in his quiver on his bow, and then a deer was coming in, and he was like, oh, I got to take the arrow out and put it on. And he didn't realize that, and I thought that was kind of funny. But I'm not much different because up until this year hunting, I didn't realize that this release, this rest that you could pre-lock it,
right,
and keep your arrow in there.
Exactly.
Honestly, the entire time I had it down, and my arrow was always falling off and clinking on stuff, and I'd be sitting in my stand holding the arrow
with
on
your
like
finger.
that.
So
I didn't realize, and then Jerry's was like, "Oh, you gotta
So
preload it."
And here's the
It's just
the benefits.
Little stupid thing that you don't know.
Now here's the benefits of a limb-driven rest versus a rest like a QAD or the type of rest that will cock into position. When you, like with a QAD, the better one, there's 3 versions. The Hunter version is cheap. It's a piece of junk, but the HDX, good rest.
Would you recommend getting that on your hunting bow?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've actually, that or Hamsky. Hamsky's very expensive. I've used either or. And the nice part is your arrow's contained, but when you draw back, you're good to go. But when you let down, the rest doesn't fall. So if you draw back on an animal and you can't shoot him, a lot of times with some of these rests, when you let down, the rest comes down, the arrow falls off, hits the stand, and the deer's gone, right? Mm-hmm. So these newer rests will only disengage and drop when you've made the shot. So definitely a benefit over a limb-driven only style rest. I mean, to each his own. Hamski has it so that you can do multiple ways with their rest. It's either limb-driven or cable-driven, QAD. It's the tried and true, cock it up and good to go, just like the ripcord.
So what other kinds of rests are there, and which ones do you like to shoot?
I mean, on this past bow that I hunted with this year, I did actually use a QAD, which was great. I say to new hunters or people that are just starting, there is nothing wrong with the biscuit. We used to characterize it as like a 30-yard rest, it absorbs an awful lot of energy out of the bow. So tuning-wise and kinetic energy-wise, it is stealing a lot out of the bow.
So it's a shorter range.
It is, really, I
But
think.
around here, honestly,
Sure.
Under 30 is like your
Absolutely.
effective range most of the time anyway.
It's a cheap rest, but they definitely work.
What does it look like? Just describe it.
It's just a biscuit of bristles.
Yeah.
And you'll
It's
have
a circle when you've got these.
and a hole and a V out of the top. You just lower it down into it, and it holds it the whole time. The bristles on the bottom are different color. They're black, and they're stiffer. They support the arrow. The ones around it, now they have them all color-coded. They're softer so that the veins can go through, and you have your least amount of deflection, affecting, the flight of the arrow.
But it has more friction than one of these drop aways,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, like a drop away, if set up properly, is completely, the arrow is an inanimate object of itself. It's not going to make any contact if it's set up right. They're the way to go. Now, the other way you can go, old school used to be the TM Hunter, was the two prongs, and you ran the cock fletch at 6 o'clock through the middle, but you were always holding your arrow with your finger, and you draw back, and the arrow would either eventually wear through the shrink tube on the metal, and it'd make a ton of noise. These new rests are all very quiet. Definitely better way to go. Thank God we have evolved.
So your go-to rest for a bow hunter would be a drop away?
I like the QAD.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like the Hamski too, but it's very pricey. So for your average hunter, I like the QAD. Now, and not to poop on the ripcord like you have there, but back when I had my shop, the only ones we really ever had any trouble with was the ripcord. The internals, if you didn't set the rest up properly, and the arrow made contact with it before it dropped, it would just damage inside easily, and then it would retard and slow down the drop.
How would I know if that's happening?
Well, one way to test it would be to spray with foot powder to see if you're getting contact.
I mean, you can just look this way. It doesn't look like everything is...
Well, if you cock that up completely straight, like if it were engaged,
Yeah.
you want it 90 degrees. A lot of the times, I know on the QAD rests, the felt that they give you to keep the arrow quiet will start tearing up. And it will sound like, not a firecracker, but it'll sound like you slapped a ruler on a desk. Mm-hmm. It's loud. It's really loud. That's when you typically know that something's not right. The cam timing is off, stopping the rest from dropping properly, and you need to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
When you see the felt coming up like yours is coming up right now,
Yep.
I mean, that doesn't look like it's been hit, but then I look at your veins, and I do see some marks on it. So I'm thinking that there's a combination of a few little things going on there.
Some of those also were missing a target shooting, and getting in, burying deep into the ground.
Sure.
But I don't know if that
Sure.
has any effect on it. But the felt's coming up. I'm gonna have to reglue it.
Yeah.
We're looking at my bow. It's a Bowtech Carbon Icon.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian
killed a few deer with that
Brian
bow.
said he's killed some deer with this bow.
I have.
It's the only bow I've ever owned. When I first got into archery, I told my buddy who was getting me into it, I was like, listen, I'll give you a budget. And I basically told him no budget.
Yeah.
Like up to $2,000.
Build me something.
Give me something. Like, let's get something good. And we went to a shop together, the one that he got his bow at, and with my budget that I told him. We walked through and he built it for me. So this is what he gave me.
Yeah, he did good.
Honestly, I've loved it. I've loved it so far.
Great bow for them when they introduced that bow a few years ago. It was basically their answer to a budget-minded carbon riser bow.
Yep.
Not as much engineering and whatnot as the Hoyt and some of the other carbon bows that came out at the time. But nonetheless, very light bow, very good bow at that price point.
It was $1,400.
Pretty tough to beat. Pretty tough to beat.
Together.
Yeah, it's a good rig.
So let's talk about stabilizers.
That right there is their version of a, some kind of a gelled suppressor or whatever in the octane. A stabilizer. A lot of guys don't pay attention to the stabilizer that they buy. They just throw anything on there.
I think a lot of guys aren't even using a stabilizer,
which is not good.
Like new hunters, they don't realize I don't want to spend another 150 on an accessory.
Exactly, and you don't have to, but you don't want a chunk of steel on there either. The bow has all this energy in it, and the residual energy that the arrow does not absorb goes to the furthest point forward. If you don't have a stabilizer, it's going to be your sights. And pretty much all sights now are fiber optic. And those fiber optics get pretty brittle over time. And the more you keep shooting without a stabilizer, that sight is taking an enormous amount of vibration and energy. If you ever watch some of these slow motion videos, you very well may not shoot a bow ever again. It would scare you what those things are doing. The way they bend. Unbelievable. You should look.
The way what bends? The arrow?
The riser. Where your peep almost comes all the way up to your riser when you shoot. Your rest is bending. It looks like a piece of spaghetti. It's incredible.
Yeah.
If you look it up, slow motion compound bows, you'll see them. It's really incredible footage. How they stay together is amazing. But the stabilizer is important. You can, even if you get something as inexpensive as just a limb saver, like a 5-inch limb saver, it's got that soft rubber that absorbs an awful lot of energy.
Like that?
Yeah, I mean it's this one here is
this is an Octane brand. I don't know anything
that's
about
by
it.
Bowtech. That's Bowtech's line.
Yep.
And my understanding with that one is it's going to be a something in there filled that is going to absorb it, and then as it goes through the stabilizer, it gets to the rubber.
So that's what this is here, the back part of it?
That's a string stop. That's completely different.
Okay.
That there is to stop the oscillation of the string.
But that's attached, is it attached to the...
Well, because you have a carbon riser and the means of attaching certain components to the bow, they just share one side to the other. But the string stop, actually your string stop right now is back just a little bit too much. Your string is pushed into it really. It's pushed into it. So you want it to be like a 1/16 of an inch away. But what that does is that absorbs a lot of the shock in the bow. If you were to shoot the bow and take it off, it would work. But you'll notice a big difference in what it feels like, the aftershock, the vibration and whatnot.
I talk about it all the time. One thing that is awesome about hunting is that there's so many different ways that you can hunt. You can always keep your hunt fresh by using different weapons or hunting in different seasons. Some state has an early season, some have a late season. You can hunt a buck here and a doe there and a Saturday here and a Sunday there. Well, one of the easiest ways to change up your hunt, if you haven't got into muzzleloader hunting yet, muzzleloader is a great way to extend your season. In New Hampshire, it's early, before the rifle season, before the bow season. In Vermont, it's late, it's at the end. But muzzleloader hunting is awesome. And so I'm super excited to announce a partnership with Woodman Arms muzzleloader. This muzzleloader actually shoots like a rifle too. And the coolest part about Woodman Arms is they recommend that you not clean your gun. You don't need to clean this thing. If you're using Blackhorn 209 powder, you don't need to clean it. Yeah. Now muzzleloaders are the messiest guns out there. You're shooting powder that's either loosely packed or in a pellet, and just imagine lighting that thing on fire in there. it's an extremely messy thing. But with the Woodman Arms, the way they build it, you don't need to clean that muzzleloader. That's like number one selling point in the world. But once you hold this thing, it feels like a rifle. It just feels right in your hands. It's got a hammerless action, so there's absolutely no hammer on the gun. It's got a crossbolt safety. It feels like you're carrying your 7600 through the woods. I'm extremely excited about this partnership. They're making me a gun right now. Throughout the summer as I'm shooting it and into the fall and getting ready, I'll report back on how it shoots. But you don't have to look any further than all the reviews and all the really great hunters in the Northeast and across the country. Really, they're selling all over the country because they're the best muzzleloader in the country. Look at what everybody else is saying about this gun. That's enough for me to endorse it without ever shooting one. But I can't wait to shoot one and follow up with you guys and tell you how it is this summer, this fall. For now, go to woodmanarms.com. Check them out. You can build your own custom gun right there. Call Timmy Bolduc, who was on this podcast and is a good friend of mine, and he'll tell you anything that you need to know about the gun. Woodman Arms, America's most accurate and dependable muzzleloader on the market, handcrafted in New Hampshire. Go to woodmanarms.com and start building your gun today.
Yeah. So let's go back real quick to the stabilizer. What would be your recommended? What do you look for in it?
I mean, just I like something that's at least as far out as the furthest point of my sight. A 5 or a 6 inch. It doesn't have to be heavy, but you want, personally, I believe, something with some form of rubber in it, like limb saver material, the Navcom, the Everlast, any of that rubber type of stuff is really going to help absorb that residual energy and definitely save your sight. Save some noise, vibration, all screws getting loose.
Why does it save the sight? Because if you didn't have it on there,
the energy that isn't the residual energy from when you shoot, that the arrow doesn't absorb, goes to the furthest point forward.
Okay.
And in this case, it would be your sight pins.
So it would shake it and jostle
eventually,
it.
Eventually, yeah. And you're gonna hear it too. Your modules on your cam are gonna loosen up. Just all your screws and everything, if they're not rusted in there, are gonna eventually loosen up. You'll start hearing rattles and whatnot. The stabilizer is an important component, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. And usually your sights are a little more expensive than the stabilizer, right? Too. So
typically,
it's like insurance on you.
Yeah, it really depends on, how elaborate you can go crazy.
But it also helps you shoot straighter, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it helps. It's not just for absorbing energy, but it helps with a little bit of balance too. The stabilizer does.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about these things. I saw you move this one up.
The damper?
Down. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the cables, a lot of factories will put these little string dampers or whatever you want to call them on the cables.
Some people put feathers on, right? If it's like a recurve or something,
sure.
They're feathers, right?
Well, they're doing that. A lot of the guys that will put a feather on, they're using that as a wind check, to see which way the wind's blowing. But
that's smart.
String silencers, whether they be the leeches or any of these type of things, are great on the string, but really not. They really don't do anything on the cables. The cable isn't moving. The cables are moving up and down, and the string is moving from full draw forward. It's a lot bigger difference.
Now, string cable.
Those are cables. Yep, those are your bus cables.
This is good. I'm still such a rookie with nerding out in the bow.
Yeah,
it all just looks like the string to me.
Right. Those are your cables. That's your main string.
Cables are the two in the front, closest to the front part of your bow.
Yeah.
And then the string is a different.
Right. Now on a solo cam, the whole deal when solo cam came out was you had one string that hooked on to either side of the bottom cam, went over a round wheel at the top, and then you had a connection with the top of the cable on the outside of the limb and connected on the other side of the cam on the bottom. So you only had really two strings, a cable and a main string.
Yeah.
And that main string was anywhere from 80 to 102 inches long. Very smooth. It didn't go out of time because there's no synchronization there. Matthews ran with that for a long time, only solo cams. That's all they did at one point. Everybody had their version. I shot Jennings for 4 years that had a solo cam, and PSE had one. Hoyt had one.
So at the time, that was the new technology.
Solo
right?
cam was where it was at. Yeah.
What about now?
Now it seems to be everything is either binary.
And why did the solo cam not kind of stick around?
Speed was the big thing. You just can't get the real fast speed out of them.
And now that everybody is a freak about speed now.
Yeah. Well, they were back in the day too, and I was as well. I mean, I can tell you, we used to build some stuff. We'd build bows at 100, 110 pounds, shooting an arrow that's like 3 grains per pound, and you'd get like 280, and you thought you were breaking the speed barrier.
Yeah.
But we were busting risers in half, breaking limbs, axles. I mean, we were blowing up stuff like crazy. These bows now can handle it, but so the new cam systems though that I've, as of late, you mostly binary hybrid, and then back to the 2-cam. The 2-cam setup went by the wayside really because being able to control the timing of 2-cams, they had to be in sync perfect, and string material back then wasn't as consistent. So you had tuning issues, and that's when the solo cam came out. Well, now that we have better string material, that's not the case anymore.
Now, like looking at a cam, it doesn't even look like it's incredible technology. Like what is so good about this?
Well,
how did it take so long?
In this particular cam that you have, actually, there's a lot of technology in that, and that's at the bottom end of Bowtech. That module that you're looking at, that gold piece, that you can flip that over. There's performance, and then there's comfort. There's 2 settings. So if you flip it over,
flip disc. I never even realized that.
So what it does is one particular way you set it up, excuse me, will give you higher let off, so you're holding less weight. You could sit there and hold it for days. The other one will give you more holding weight, which will make you a little more steady. That's where you're getting all of the speed, because as you're pulling string off, you're wrapping cable on, but what you're wrapping it onto is something that's obtuse. Mm-hmm. So when you let go of the string, it has to go around that cycle, and that's where you get your speed from. And now you look at all the new Matthews bows, all the new PSEs, the Hoyts, they all have these huge cams that have smaller modules. They're still getting the speed, but they're getting the smoothness and the comfort. It's they've almost reached, I believe, that they're about as far as they can go. There's really not much more they can do with them.
That's what you say now. Yeah.
I know it.
So looking at these two, they're rusted a little bit. You recommend?
I just take them out and change them.
Putting a new one in,
yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're missing a draw stop too.
Yeah, I told you that. Like there's.
It's important.
I hunted this year without the draw stop in, because it was like right before hunting season, like a few days before.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, with COVID, we don't have any here. You have to contact Bowtech and have them get you one."
I got like 20 of them. But see, you have one in the top.
Yeah, right.
But you don't have one in the bottom.
Something happened, and I don't know. I thought I had it there when I brought it in.
Now, you can get away with it. You can
tell everybody what the draw stop does. Make sure you don't overdraw.
Well, the draw stop gives you that hard back wall. If you were to take that off with a lot of the new bows, the let-offs are so high that you'd pull it to a point where it would let off and lock up. The bow won't shoot. You would literally have like a piece of spaghetti. When the Elite bows first came out, that was one of the things that happened a lot, is you'd work on a bow, you'd put it back together, you'd forget to put the draw stops on, you draw it back, and gunk, you'd just be sitting there and the bow's at full draw and the string is just hanging.
What?
It's beyond the most obtuse part of the module that it can't recover. You went too far.
Does that destroy the bow?
They first, there were guys at first, they'd take them and they'd throw them, and the bow would just decable and blow up.
Jesus.
So what we would do is put it in a press it, take the cables off, and let it out and rebuild it. It didn't hurt the bow, but important, when you have a bow that is supposed to have draw stops, they need to be in cahoots with the draw length. So if you're a 30-inch draw, there's a certain spot that draw stop has to be in that goes with that draw length. If you put it too short or too long, it's going to mess up your tuning. Yeah.
Now, before this year, I told you, like, I think I got this bow in 2016, might have been 2015. My buddy built it out for me. The pro shop that I was at, got the right arrows for me and stuff. And
Sure.
I had that for years because I didn't hunt too much until this past year. I hunted way more than I ever did with a bow. I was going out, like I was telling you, driving to Leominster, a couple weekends out of the whole year, and I'd get a Saturday in twice in a year, and that was the extent of my bow hunting.
A whole Saturday.
So, one Saturday and maybe two out of the year, and that was my bow hunting here. But I was bringing this. It wasn't getting a lot of mileage. The bow wasn't getting mileage, the arrows weren't, so I had the same original arrows that I bought at the shop when everybody was telling me what to do, but I didn't know anything, and I still don't know too much about arrow setup, bow setup, and what works together with the bow, and the heavy, what weight you need for an arrow on what draw length and what weight that you're drawing back and all that stuff. I don't know too much about that, but there's a point where, like, I shot through all those arrows that I originally had, and then I just went to the store and, like, bought a pack of arrows. I had no idea. I didn't realize you need to get an arrow that matches every single part of your bow.
It is. It is. It is definitely individual.
I was shooting 250.
250 spine.
Yeah.
So it's related to
for like a year.
Spine, arrow length, full peak draw weight.
Yeah.
And then you have to consider what broadhead you're going to shoot as well.
Yeah.
It's all relative to get the correct arrow.
So first you got to have your bow set up the way it is. I mean, there's two ways. You could tweak your bow to fit the arrow you have, or find the right arrow to fit the bow setup that you have, which is the best way to do it.
Yeah, yes
right?
And no. I mean, you want to, I want an arrow that's going to give me a ton of kinetic energy. I want an arrow that's going to give me a lot of speed and good kinetic energy. What do I want to do? What broadhead am I going to shoot? Start off there first, but none of it works if the bow isn't set up properly. Cam timing, center shot, tiller.
So you would say
length.
Almost kind of like get the arrow that you want first and set up on the arrow and then reverse engineer it?
Well, we know that, like a 60-pound bow with like a 28-inch draw, a 400 spine arrow in almost any company that's made, a 400 spine arrow is more than enough spine.
Yep.
It's fine.
That's what I got here, and that's why I did this. Yeah,
so
this year.
if you get those, then for a hunter, I would say, okay, next question is what broadhead? If it's going to be a fixed broadhead, I'm going to recommend a 4-inch vane or a 3-inch 4-fletch vane, something that's going to have a lot more steering capability than like a little blazer. If you want to try to get your broadheads and field points to hit the same, you need to know, before we choose an arrow, what kind of broadhead do I think I want to shoot?
So you're saying with a fixed broadhead, you want to have more fletchings or longer fletching because it's going to stabilize it a little bit more?
It's going to help.
Because the fixed is heavier than an expandable.
No, it isn't that it's heavy. It's that it creates wind plane.
Okay.
It's steerage.
Yeah.
So, you have a few small fixed broadheads that are out there. Again, my opinion, but I think more would share this than not. I know I'm going to get hammered for this one, but
for some reason everybody thinks like the broadhead conversation is so.
Yeah, it's really, mechanicals don't work, blah blah blah. Anyway, that's a subject for another day. But like a slick trick or a G5 or maybe even a small muzzy or a bacon skinner, any of these little fixed broadheads, you're not going to have a lot of trouble with. You get into these bigger broadheads that have more surface area. That broadhead wants to control the flight of the arrow. So if we have any tuning issues at all, it's going to magnify it huge.
Yeah. Okay.
If the bow is absolutely tuned perfect and then we screw on this big broadhead. If you don't have the correct steering on there to basically keep that broadhead in line, make it behave, you're going to be 6 to 10, 12 inches off of your field points. So how are we going to practice during hunting season without ruining our broadheads if we sight it in only for our broadheads?
Mm-hmm.
Now now you need virgin broadheads for hunting and practice broadheads. They all have to be the same.
And that's expensive too.
And it gets expensive.
Yeah.
So hence why I'll say, you can make them work, but it takes an awful lot of tuning, and now you're tuning for the broadhead because that's the one I want to shoot, and I'm not saying the mechanicals are a Band-Aid. However, on a perfectly tuned bow, a mechanical broadhead, a good quality one, you can shoot with almost any fletching configuration, 4-inch helical, 3-inch blazer. It really doesn't matter because they're not going to overpower the steering of the arrow.
It's closer to a field point.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And what would you say are the better broadheads? Mechanical broadhead.
I mean, mechanical,
Yeah.
I've been a Spitfire guy since the day they came out. NAP Spitfire, the
Yeah.
100s. Now, they're up over the top. They're not a slip back like a Rage or some of these other ones.
I've got the Grim Reaper.
The Grim
Yeah.
Reapers. And that's up over the top. Some of the Rage, some of them, they have had problems with certain collars. Some of them are great. I've seen more gaping holes from Rage broadheads. They work. They flat out work. However, there's a maintenance factor there. You got to pay attention, make sure they're not deployed. With the over-the-top broadheads like a Spitfire, they're clicked in. That's it. They're in, and that's the end of it. The NAP Kill Zone, same thing. They're clicked in. You don't have to really be overly concerned about it. What happens is you have guys won't spend a lot on mechanical broadheads, and they'll buy some Cabela's or Bass Pro brand, and they fail, and then now they hate fixed mechanicals. They didn't open, blah, blah, again, for another day.
And on the other end of the spectrum, guys who are shooting fixed, probably a lot of the times are skimping on the tuning of the bow.
Sure.
Right? And so that...
and the argument is, we'll get into it a little. If things go wrong, I don't want to have to worry about my head opening. The most important part, in my opinion, and I think a lot will share the same, is the accuracy of your hunting arrow is the single most important part of the whole system.
Yeah.
Period. Mm-hmm. If it's a field point and you stick them in the lungs, you're going to kill them. You may not find them.
Yeah.
Because of lack of blood trail. Your accuracy is the most important part, because if you're relying on, what if something happens? I would rather have, what if something happens with the most accurate arrow I can have.
And even if that doesn't open up, it's bigger than a field point.
Sure, but it has to open up.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I went to NAP and watched the Spitfire open on a balloon. They absolutely, they do open. So when guys find them on the ground and the blade is closed, the inertia will close them.
Well,
when you pull them out of the ground, it will close them.
That's what happened this year with me, with this 6-pointer I got here to tag out on.
Yeah.
I saw him run away with it in him.
Yeah.
And I backed out, came inside, told the wife, like, hey, I shot one, arrow's still in him. I got to give him a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And when I went back out, I went to where I shot him. There wasn't any blood at all, but I remembered exactly where he ran.
You didn't have an exit hole.
No exit hole. No,
Yeah.
it was in him.
Yeah.
And I just kept going. I was looking for the arrow first. I looked. Took me 10 minutes. I found the arrow, and these were
Closed.
they were closed.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, it didn't open.
Yeah.
It didn't open.
Yeah.
And then just posted that on
And
on the page. People were like, actually, no, when it comes back out of the deer,
hide
they
closes it. Right.
And sure enough, when I took his liver out, it was a perfect huge.
Right. Like I've shot through a 2-inch block of foam, like really dense stuff.
Yeah.
So that it wouldn't wouldn't completely go through. You put paper on both sides, and the blades are closed on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
it goes through and hits, and the inertia closes the blade.
Even if it didn't pop back out,
Right.
going through it
Right,
closes
the
again.
inertia will.
Yeah.
They're not completely shut, but they're like almost closed.
Yeah.
So the thing of I lost them because of a mechanical, and we're kind of going down another road here, but it wasn't because of the mechanical. Because if it's put in the right spot, you got them. And
Yeah.
whether it's fixed,
Yeah.
mechanical, it doesn't matter.
That's like back in the day,
Focus more on the accuracy and getting your crap together when the time comes to do your job.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You're more confident because you're so much more accurate.
It's like people used to kill deer with 22s
Sure.
back in the day. It's like,
Right.
yeah, put it in the right spot.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like if you're out there and you're fixed heads, you've got every single one of them working, great. That you're good to go. But if you grab one to the next, and because the orientation of the blades to the vanes are identical, there's a possibility they're not going to hit the exact same spot.
Yeah.
Do you want to have to deal with that
Yeah.
versus I know with this, I can hit a quarter. I know. Now, to take it a little further, the more confident you are that I know my setup is perfect, I'm accurate, you're not going to get that buck fever as much. My opinion is guys that get really rattled, and we all do, right? We all just get all jacked up. I think a lot of it is what you're thinking about. You're thinking about, I don't want to screw up. I don't want to wound him. I want to be the hero. I can't wait to see him in my truck and on my wall, instead of
Yeah.
the job at hand, which is I'm a killing machine. My bow is perfect, and I'm going to pick a hair right there.
Yep.
It's all, I think, and we used to preach at our shop, is let's teach you how to think about it differently instead of worrying about it, which leads to the buck fever of failure.
Yeah.
It was always our belief. And yeah, I mean, everything happens. You hit a branch, this happens. You hit your knee with your bottom cam. Things can happen. However, I believe that your best scenario is the most accurate arrow you can shoot. And if that means...
Because that's not going to change. Whether
it's not going to change.
You have your arrow the way you want it to be,
Right.
the way that you're confident in it.
Right.
That isn't going to be the reason you miss a deer. There's so many things that can go wrong.
And I'm not saying that you can't do it with a fix, because you can, because there's some great fixed broadheads out there.
Yep.
It's when you take these newer bows that are way faster, they're storing way more kinetic energy than we used to have. It has effects on an arrow with a fixed head. Your average guy isn't going to put in 100 hours of paper tuning and tuning a fixed broadhead. So that, you'll have some guys will have a 100 grain field point. I'll grab any 100 grain fixed broadhead and it should hit the same. Doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but it doesn't. However, again, you put on a good quality mechanical, it pretty much does work that way. It is going to hit the same. And now you can just focus on the things that are,
So to somebody just getting into hunting, buying an entry level bow, buying what they can, you recommending right here, right now, you're recommending they get a mechanical for the broadhead they shoot, because less can go wrong, or what?
Well, that's the argument, right? Less can go wrong if you don't have anything mechanical, but I would say it's really an individual basis of I want to see how they can shoot. Let's see how good they are at shooting.
Yeah, I guess I would say if you're, even, again, I've been bow hunting only 4 years. I'm still, when it comes to even naming the parts of a bow, I'm pretty much a newbie. Go into your local pro shop, right? Because those guys are going to know what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you never want to have just your buddy do it, or
don't just run out of arrows and go to freaking Bass Pro. That's what I did. I'm an idiot. That's what I did.
Well, everybody did. I did when I first started as a kid. I'd grab any arrow and I shot it. But now that we have shops available to us, go to a shop. Learn how to shoot properly, good form first, buy the best arrow you can afford, and don't skimp on your broadheads. And I like the NAP products. I like the G5 stuff. The smaller size muzzies. I know there's a whole bunch of other two-bladed, real thick broadheads out there, real wall thickness of blades. There's a whole bunch of other ones out there. If you want to be that guy that tries them all and whatnot, if your bow is tuned perfect with field points and you have to start moving your rest and moving around everything to make that broadhead work, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you move the rest, now you've affected your tune. You know what I mean? You don't want to do that. When I get that question all the time is, I'm tearing left, I'm tearing right, I don't know, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, the arrow has to sit in the middle of the string. Most of our bows now are 13/16 from the inside edge of the riser to the center of the shaft. You can't just keep moving the arrow left and right to get a bullet hole. There's something wrong if it's not working.
Yeah.
Tip weight, wrong nock, too heavy of vanes, too stiff of arrow, or you're gripping the living hell out of it, which is a problem, form issue. But when you enter broadheads into all of that fixed, it's a problem. So.
Great. Well, let's take a real quick break, and
Sure.
I want to look at your arrows and talk releases a little bit.
Sure.
And we'll be right back.
Sure.
All right, just want to take a quick break and remind everybody that's listening, please, if you haven't, go on to iTunes or the podcast app, anywhere that you can leave a review on the podcast. iTunes and the Apple Podcast app are the best places to do so because it really helps in the rankings. Go in there, leave a written review, tap on the 5-star rating. It's going to help us a lot in shooting up the rankings and getting this podcast out to more people, and I would really greatly appreciate that. Go and subscribe on our YouTube page if you haven't yet. It's Hunt Suburbia, youtube.com/Hunt Suburbia. Of course, follow us on all of our social medias. Continue to interact with us. And if you have any questions or anything you want to send me, shoot me an email at huntsuburbia@gmail.com.
All right, we're back here after a short break. Let's talk about, since you own Viscosity Strings and you're a string guy, let's talk about strings, and then we'll get into real quick releases. I want to look at your arrows.
Sure.
And maybe like some sight preferences, but let's talk about Viscosity Strings.
So, Viscosity bowstrings. I've been making strings for a little over 35 years. I have a few friends in the business. We all basically, well, there's a couple of us, make them the same generally. But myself, I like to think that because I'm a target archer, a hunter, I understand what people want, what they need, and the industry really, it's pretty flooded.
Look, the layman is not going to know what's being put. Like,
No.
I brought this and got it restringed because my string was fraying because I was hitting bad form.
Yeah.
I was hitting my my arm guard, and I had to get a new string. It was a few days before hunting season. I brought it in. They could have put any string on there.
I know it.
And I have no idea. So, like, what do you look for?
So,
What's the differences in string makes?
I'm not going to promote a whole bunch of companies. I have no trouble saying how great Eric at Gas. He's he was just a little kid when he started making strings. I won't say that I showed him, but we worked together on a lot of things. He's probably the biggest company out there now. I'm not as big as a lot of these other companies, but I have been doing it the longest. And we share a lot of the same idea, the proprietaries of how you have to make a proper string and how it affects the bow. The problem with a lot of these other string manufacturers are, in my opinion, and I think others would share, is the stretching process is probably your most important part of a good constructed string. Obviously the material.
What are these strings made of, by the way?
So I use exclusively BCY materials. Bob Destin out of Middletown, Connecticut, is the company BCY Fibers. 99% of my strings are all made out of a material called 452X. It's a blend of Vectran, Dyneema, just blends of material. I won't bore you with all that, but it's certain percentages of material that make the most stable string so that it doesn't move. If your cables or your strings are moving, excuse me, because of stretching, your bow is going to one day be accurate, the next day it's not.
So last year, before my bow frayed, my peep was like way turned.
Mm-hmm.
Before and so before every time I shot, I would go like this, just for a quick set. It's not like I would leave it there and it would slowly come back, but then I would draw, and I was like, this is not the way that this bow should be working.
Right.
And then luckily I frayed my string because I had bad form anyway, and I had to get a new one. But
so, looking over at your bow, your cables look like factory Bowtech cables.
Yep.
They're made with BCY fibers, I believe, still. One of the better factory strings out there. But you can tell by, like if you look at your serving on your cables right now, they're a little chalky white.
Yep.
The reason for that is the outside diameter of your cable has gotten slightly smaller than when it was first built. So your serving material now is a little loose. I can just tell by looking at it that it's a little loose, and that's why it's not as dark. It's white. And that's when you get your serving separation. It doesn't look like you have any issues with it right now. But your string is made by a different manufacturer, the one that you had replaced.
Yep.
That one is twisted counterclockwise. I mean, it's twisted the incorrect way. IMO, in my opinion.
So there's like some manufacturers will do counterclockwise on purpose?
Well, that's just how they do their processes.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is the materials. If you don't have somebody that understands making the full string unit all in one direction, you have that peep roll that you were dealing with before. So you'll draw back and the peep will roll, and that's because the string is twisted counterclockwise. The serving is applied clockwise. So when you're putting the serving on, underneath that serving, you're untwisting the string, but you're really not. And then when it finally gets some tension on it, it straightens out. Getting a little detailed here, but your center serving, very important that it's, again, served in the correct same direction. And when they don't do these things, that's when you have problems.
Okay.
My stuff I have changed very little since I started selling public. I believe I still stretch them longer and higher poundage than anybody else.
Which means what? What does that translate into?
Poundage, like when you lay up a string, it's laid up of a certain amount of strands of material. You close the ends, and then you put the twist rate in it that you want, and you put it on a stretcher. Something else is, they're all wax coated. And that wax is taking up space between the strands. If they're not stretched at a high enough rate, that wax is going to remain in that unit.
Yeah.
And over time of you shooting it, that's how the string is going to, what they call stretch. It's not stretching anymore.
The wax is going to erode enough so that the string is going to close in, and then it's going to become longer.
Wax is space, space is length.
Yeah.
So the stretching process for me, I stretch at a very high poundage and a lot longer time. I mean, like when I build a set for myself, I'll stretch it for like a month. Now, you really could stretch it for a few hours and it's good, but I'll go overboard for my own stuff.
Yeah, it's like aging venison.
Yeah, oh yeah. But you could take, if you were to take the same string and stretch one for 24 hours and then one for 3, and you take them off of that stretcher and lay them on a table.
Yeah.
The one that's been there for 24 hours isn't even going to move. The one that's been on for a few hours, you're going to watch it roll. It's going to move. It's going to twist. It's just going to lay there and move around slow. It's not done. There's life in it, basically.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I've put some pictures on about how you see all the wax bleeding out of the string. If you don't see that, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
My opinion again. But it's an important part of the whole setup. If they're not done right, if they're not done by somebody that understands how the whole unit works, it just leads to inaccuracy, frustration,
Last minute having to switch your bowstring out before a season. I mean, that's I was I was frustrated.
And I'll get a lot of guys right around August that will say, I think I'll wait till the end of the year because I don't want to change it now. It's too close to season. And I'll always say, it's funny you say that. Do you want to go out into the woods with something that's inferior?
Yeah.
We can build a setup for you that I'm telling you it's not going to move. Now you're going into the woods with the bow's ready to go. Do you want a big buck walks in and the string snaps? You've waited so long for that opportunity. Are you really... it isn't like because we put a new string on your bow, all of a sudden you forget how to shoot and you don't know how to sight in. It's a couple of hours of getting back to it.
Is it really going to change the accuracy of of the arrow at the moment, or is it really just going to be more longevity?
It could change the impact of where your bow is sighted in at prior to, and then when you put the new strings on, you could be an inch low, an inch high, or whatever. Yeah. But the thing is when we build them and reset it up, now the bow it's set up for your new strings. Yeah. Your gaps between your pins, your average 20, 30, 40, the gaps in between shouldn't change because your speed really hasn't changed. Unless we have a huge jump in speed. Yeah. You should be able to adjust so that your 20's on and everything falls back into place. Now you're ready to go. Yeah. And I will more times than not convince those that are worried, it'll take a couple hours, you're good to go again, but now you're safe. Now you're really good to go. Yeah. Get rid of that, if I didn't do this, or, you don't want to leave anything to chance. It's just like, one of the things that myself and some of the string manufacturers do is we close our end loops. And that's where your string connects to the cam. Some companies don't. They'll take the material and wrap it back and then rely on the serving to hold it in place. If that end loop is not served over and then you twist it, then stretch it, what's holding that from moving?
If your bow was a spaceship trying to get to Mars, which way would you like it to actually be done so that it wouldn't fail?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So our theory is always, if we serve the end loops and lock it in, you're basically locking in the end of that strand like you do a knocking loop on your string. Yeah. It cannot back up. It can't. So you eliminate that. Well, if you don't serve your loops, it could be that. Why have that? So we've always served the loops.
Yeah, that's smart. Where can people go if they want to buy a string from you right now?
Honestly, it's as personal as it gets. I give out my personal cell phone.
Give it out.
And they give
it out right now.
978-501-6210. I'm a texting type of guy. Yep. Message me.
Don't shoot them any pics.
No. Yeah.
Unless they're big bucks.
I'm usually I will return calls up till around midnight-ish. My work schedule is a little crazy, but now with COVID, a lot of what I do is guys will drop bows off. I'll build them, put them back together. We make arrangements to pick them up. They have, you'll have minimal amount of sighting back in, but typically it's an inch here, an inch there, and then you're good to go. Yeah.
You still got 123 targets in your backyard?
I do not. I have one. I have one deer target now.
Look, you gotta wean yourself off of that addiction.
I'll tell you, it was it's funny because once in a blue moon, I find myself getting dependent on my rangefinder. But once in a while, I'll just for the hell of it, I'll look at something really far and judge it and be like, man, I wonder if I still got it, and I'll look. And
Just judging the distance without the finder, right?
Like, man, that's about 43 yards. And I'll look at it, maybe 42 yards, and I'll range find it. It's like 41 and a half.
Yeah, you still.
And like,
I bet you don't got that in the water though.
Huh? No.
You look at a dock, you can't say how far that the water does some crazy stuff.
I'll tell you, with some of the fish finders we use, that boulder is 60 feet out, and like, all right, that's 20 yards, and you try and flip it to it, and you're watching it. But the yardage thing, it's funny. There's a few of my buddies, Joe Santos and Jason and Sean Roberts and Brandon and a bunch. They all over me. You got to come back to 3D and shoot it and whatever. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm always fishing, so.
Yeah.
But funny. Strings, get a hold of me if you need it. I will do my best to accommodate and take care of. I build it like it's for myself. Every single one of them, I build it like it's going on my bow. That's the way it's always been. That used to drive my mother crazy when we had the shop. I would personally want to talk to every single customer, and it drove her crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I take a name, I will call them. I don't want them just thinking this is a guy from canoeing is building your string. I'm a hunter, I'm a target archer. I want to talk to them because every single setup, you could have 20 bows exactly the same, but depending on the application and what that guy's using it for, what arrows they're using, whatever, I want to know so I can make it right.
100%.
Yeah.
What's your number again?
978-501-6210.
Awesome.
Yeah, message me.
And it's so it's so funny. It's like you want to get out there and fish as much as you possibly can. You want to get out there and just go after your target bucks. We talked about it in a previous podcast, but everything goes back to just the basics of your equipment, right? Yeah. It's like you need to be confident in your equipment.
You do, 100%. I have always preached that once you get your bow sighted in and you're shooting well, you're a killing machine. Believe that. You have a job to do when you're in your stand. When you see a deer that you've decided you're going to take, and go into the mode of where you're going to kill them and go into that, talk yourself through it, there will not be as much buck fever rather. You'll get used to talking yourself through it, and I believe you'd be a lot more successful. Really.
Yeah, and just practice. Sure. I think it was the previous podcast that we did where you were talking about how you had 120 targets, right?
Yeah.
How did that even happen? Did you just like where were you buying them from?
People
don't know, like 3D targets are $200 to $300 a piece. So do the math. That's a lot of money.
I probably had maybe 14 or 15, and then I was shooting the ASA circuit, and they would sell them at the end of the weekend. And I brought my truck down with a trailer and bought a range.
And they would sell them for way cheaper.
Much cheaper.
Yeah.
And with the Reinhardts, you got the replaceable kill with it. So they were lasting a real long time. So I bought one range, and then a friend of mine bought a range. And something happened where he wanted to buy a plow from me. And I said, well, I'll give you the plow, you give me the range. So there's more time. And I just kept accumulating them. And I wanted to have all the targets that I was going to encounter for tournaments. I wanted to have them.
Yep.
It was crazy.
Man, it's so similar to the Spartan race where I worked for the last 10 years. It's when people get really into Spartan race and obstacle course racing, they want to build the obstacles in their backyard.
Yeah.
They want the same tire to flip and all the same. They want and it's you were into it that way. But hey, that is you wanted to be great.
Yeah, I mean, when I was trying to make USAT a few years back, I was working for myself. With the shop, we didn't open till noontime or so. I'd get up every single morning and shoot, and I was hoping for days. My coach, Terry, would tell me the days that are windy, those are the days I really want you to go out and shoot. Because when you get into some of these events in Arizona and California, whatever, it's windy, it's awful.
Again, you're reminding me of Tiger Woods training.
You got to practice it. And Braden helped me with some of that, making sure, you had to learn your bow to hold half a bubble or any of these things to put them in the middle. And I was all in. I was definitely.
I can't believe that there are kids these days that are shooting 60 arrows into a dime.
It's disgusting.
At 20 yards. I mean, that is crazy.
I don't know
How
them.
do you do that?
I don't know them, but I'm proud of them.
Are they using advanced technology, magnified,
They're really
sights?
not.
Like, what do they do?
I think once they find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, maybe it changes. But a lot of these kids, there's some of these girls are just unbelievable. You tell them to do it, and they just do it.
And again, archery's one of these things, right? The
girls are unbelievable.
The girls are just as good as the guys. It's not a strength thing. It's an accuracy thing.
Well, and it's guys will want to overpower and overthink it and everything else. Not to take away from them, but this younger generation of shooters, the equipment that's available to them. Yeah. And the coaching that's available to them, they just get up and do it. They don't overthink it. They just stand up there and perform a perfect shot, one after the other. That's always been my downfall, and probably why I didn't take it any further, is mentally I'd beat myself up enough. I would get upset. I would get mad. One arrow could tailspin me pretty bad. And
it's like road rage.
Oh yeah. God. Oh yeah, self-harm too.
A couple of friends, I've seen playing golf that just throw their club into a swamp after the bad shot.
There's been, my buddies will joke about it. There's been some bows that were thrown over the years, for sure. Yeah.
That were never recovered, or?
Oh no, recovered, but had to be rebuilt, and
Yeah. We've been going for a while. I do want to touch on a few things, though.
Sure.
Releases. What kind of releases do you recommend? I mean, this is the only one I've ever owned. It's a wrist strap.
That's a strap release. That's a True Ball.
Yep. True Ball.
Good release. I mean, you got couple of good companies out there. True Ball. Scott's one of the best.
I will say the one downfall of this one is I have it on my wrist all the time, and it's hanging, it's making noises. Yeah. I've seen some where people, they're literally just putting it in their.
So that's a handheld,
and they're putting it. What's that called? The
knocking loop.
The knocking loop, and it's hanging there,
right,
while their bow's hanging. That kind of looks better because then you're more free.
Well, but you reach over to it and you hit the button, and then the release is on the ground.
Yep.
So it has its trade-offs. I always keep a spare in my backpack, but yeah, you got True Ball, Scott, Carter, Stan, great release companies. For your average guy just starting and whatnot, I recommend the strap, a leather buckle, not Velcro, because you're going to get a consistent hole that you put it in every time, and the hookup length is going to be the same. You're not going to have an alteration in your draw length.
Yep.
For your anchor and your P-pipe.
So would you recommend a True Ball?
True Ball's a great release.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I've liked it.
Every company has good, better, and best in their line. Again, I say, afford, buy the best that you can afford. True Fire is a company that's been out for a long time. They make a few, in my opinion, decent releases, but they make an awful lot of substandard stuff. Like, you'll be pulling the trigger and you'll feel the mechanism opening.
Yeah.
That leads to a lot of problems, target panic, anticipation. You don't want that.
Yep.
You want it to be a surprise. Shooting on command, there's very few that can do it properly, consistently. So, with these strap releases, we want to make sure that you're not stretching for the trigger. When you're loading onto your release to your knocking loop, it almost needs to be a problem where it feels so short that you can't load it. Because when you apply the pressure of the bow pulling it, now it pulls it to where the trigger is going to be in the middle of your finger, not at the end.
Yep.
It's important. Guys will be stretching for that trigger, and then all that movement in their hand, they're changing, again, their anchor, how they're looking through their peep. You don't want to do that.
And what about, so for sights, again, this is the first bow, the only bow I've ever owned.
It's a good one.
It's a Trophy Ridge sight with 5 pins.
Decent.
And
lot going on there.
It has killed every deer for me, and I've loved it, and I still love it. And Trophy Ridge was a sponsor last year, and I realized they have a bunch of different kind of sights. They got the 1-pin sights, and for me, it feels like a 1-pin sight. I wouldn't want to have to be adjusting in the last second, so that seems like a weird thing for me.
So I've hunted with a 1-pin for probably almost 20 years now.
Yep. So you're just used to it.
I'm used to it because when I shot 3D, I was used to shooting open class 1-pin. The way I would set up my bow, the way we would set up a lot of beginners at the shop, and I still recommend, is for new hunters. The single pin's nice because you can put it in the center of the optic. You center up your peep over that optic. The pin is in the middle. Depending on if you get your bow fast enough, we're talking in the 280s or better, you can set that pin somewhere around 25, 26 yards. You'll be an inch high at 20, inch and a half high at 20, maybe an inch or two low at 30. You're covered to 30 yards. Around here, anything.
Most of your shots, you just put it in the natural spot.
Yep. Right, exactly. So when you have multiple pins, what a lot of beginners have trouble with is they pull back in the heat of the moment. If they look through the peep, they get all these pins on the animal, and they shoot, and they're like, oh, I don't even know what pin I used.
Yep.
Again, they're not walking themselves through the process, right? So the 1-pin, it lets you, you have that bubble around you of 30 yards. I know anything inside this bubble, if it's a good open, good shot, I'm confident I can do it. If they're further than that, usually you can move it. Me personally, my ability level, I could certainly shoot a lot further than I do. If they don't break 35 yards, I'm not doing it. And I know I can. But, I just believe there's too much that can go wrong.
You're a competition archer, man.
Right.
Where it's 50 meters.
I can't bring myself to do it because I've been on too many unfortunate blood trails of the bad end of things with people. I don't want to go through it. It's been a long time since I've lost a deer, and I don't want to go through that. So, again, the multiple pins are good. Trophy Ridge, CBE, Spot Hog, True Glow actually has a few decent ones. Good fiber optics, depending on how good your vision is. 19,000s, 10,000s is good.
Now, something that's, I actually want to just pick your brain about real quick is I don't pay too much attention to the balance, to the
level.
Yeah, the level part.
And it's important.
It's probably really important, but I haven't noticed any significant, when I'm target shooting and even like, I'm not making a conscious decision while I'm aiming at a deer to make sure that bubble is level.
You earlier, or just a little bit ago, I said that about shooting in the wind, and something that I worked with my coach, and Braden helped me was, and I said half a bubble. If you're canting to one side or to the other, you're gonna follow that direction. So if your top limb is to the left, right-handed archer, and your top limb is canted to the left, your arrow is gonna fall from the target to that direction. So if you sight it in, and you're sighted in plumb, and your level is level, and now your marks are right, and then you can't, you're going to be left or right.
But if you have a bad habit and you sighted it in that way, that's why I'm not really noticing a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's in your peripheral vision, your level. But you don't want to. There's where the sidebars come into effect. You don't want to force the bow to be plumb either. You don't want it to be level and plumb by making it that way. You want to naturally hold the bow comfortably in your hand. The sidebar to one side is what counteracts that and will pull you into level naturally instead. That's why you see all these bows with those sidebars. that's, it works for that, and it also works for front back balance. But the bubble's important. Try and work on that.
Yeah. I know I got a lot of work to do.
And the one of the biggest tips that we always used to give is keep the pin on the deer, the target, or whatever it is you're aiming at until the arrow hits. Follow through. Just like a golf swing, just like anything, you have to follow through the shot.
Yep, and that's another thing that
big deal.
Don't do too much is the drop after, where you pull back and you let go and you just let the bow naturally drop off of your... Yeah. I actually don't think about that too much, and I haven't, but again, I'm still new to it. But.
Yep. No, it's just a good practice is to... we would say, when somebody would shoot, where's your pin? And it's always aiming at the ground. Keep the pin on the target till the arrow hits. And especially if you sight in that way.
So it's not right when you release, you let it go. You want to pressure trigger on the release.
Yeah.
When you see it hit the target, then you just let the bow drop.
The bow goes off. Keep your aiming eye or eyes on your pin at the target. Follow through the whole way. That stops you from dropping your arm. If you get in that habit and you do that and you're sighting in and you're shooting, well, when you're aiming at a deer, again, you're going through your process of, I'm going to follow through.
Yeah.
And you're going to watch. You're basically where your pin is on the animal, your arrow, you're going to see it intersect the pin because you're focused on looking through it the whole way. By that time, the arrow's already through the deer and gone.
Yep.
So, yeah, just follow through. Just a couple things.
All right, let's look at your arrows real quick that you got in your bag there.
Well, this is. I brought this today because I wanted to.
We'll do a video.
This is.
But they look so nice. Like my arrows are just off the shelf. These look like.
Aren't they cute?
Yeah, they look like, man, this dude's into it.
So this is arrow number 1. This is the one I will always pull out first. I don't know why, because they all hit exactly the same. It's
funny how you put it in your quiver, and it's the same thing too. And for me, when I go out, I'm always pulling this one.
That's number 1.
Yeah.
That's number 2. And in the video, I'll explain why. This is a Gold Tip Hunter Pro.
That looks nice.
Okay. And if you look at it, it is a 500 spine.
It looks like unlike any arrow I've ever seen, because even up here,
it's a pin knock.
Yeah, it's like way more narrow than the actual width of the arrow.
Right. So it's a pin that's in the back. It's basically a target arrow morphed into a hunting arrow. So you have a lot of guys on the national circuit using these for 3D because it's not a fat arrow, but it's a extremely straight arrow. This is .0015, but it's a 500 spine, and most would say, "My God, Brian, it's such a light arrow."
So what does 500 spine actually mean to the layman?
The spine is the amount of deflection in the arrow.
So I've got a 400 spine.
Yours is stiffer than this.
Meaning, as it flies, it's not going to bend as much.
It's the amount of when they put it on when they put weight on it. It's the deflection from straight.
So if you have a 100, it's super stiff.
Oh yeah, you would never. So a 500 spine.
The Indians used hundreds.
I get a lot of crap for this that I shoot a very light arrow. This arrow weighs total.
Does it mean it goes faster when it's lighter?
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
it's
so
a lot
500's faster.
Yeah, I'm doing, this is about a 310 grain arrow total with a 100 grain point. 4 fletch, X veins, 4 fletch with a pin knock. I'm doing just over 300 feet a second.
Looks fairly short too.
It is.
Yep.
And I have a 29.5 inch draw.
I think that's my draw as well.
It is an absolute dart, and I have had, a half a dozen bears and more than 100 whitetails with a Spitfire. And I have had failure twice, and it's been my fault. It has not been the arrow's fault. It's been
I've never even heard
fault.
of a Spitfire,
So it's over the top.
Yeah, just like my Grim Reaper.
Yep. But it doesn't have any kind of a collar, retainer ring. It's got a sliver inside.
It looks like that's been used multiple times too. That particular broadhead's probably killed.
This has killed a few. And I just put new replacement blades and new internals in it, and it's been a good head. But I use a 4 fletch, so they're very small. It's only a 2.8 fletch, but it's 4.
That's why it looks different than that 4 fletch.
And if you look at it, it's offset to the left. Okay.
Helical?
See if you look at the no, it's a straight, but it's offset to the left.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And the thing with that is, a lot of your archers actually, if you were to shoot this shaft bare, I'm giving up some trade secrets here. I'm probably going to catch hell for this. But a lot of your right-handed archers, I would venture to guess most, if you were to shoot the shaft bare and mark it and shoot it at 10 feet, you'd see where the rotation is in the mark, and then step back to 12 feet and you'd see the mark. And you'd look at it. The natural rotation for right-handed shooters is it's going to rotate counterclockwise, left. So you would fletch it left wing or left offset so that it doesn't fight it out of the bow. Since I switched to this system quite a few years ago, my tuning has gotten a lot easier. But the 4 fletch, the other thing it does is because of the way of the offset, you notice the clearance that I have by my cables. You know, because you're not with yours. If you look at yours the way it is, with the high profile of a blazer vane, this is very close to your cables right here.
For sure.
Look at that.
I've always wondered that.
Now look at that. You see the difference?
I've always wondered why would a manufacturer even do that then?
Well, it's to gain stability of the arrow. That's the whole thing of the blazer, is because it's a high profile in the back, it helps steer the arrow. So the Mini 4 fletch, I have just as much surface area, if not more, than yours, but I have better clearance and more stability.
Yeah.
Now, do I need it for a mechanical? Nope. But it groups amazing.
Yeah.
It's just what has worked for me. I think a lot of guys are going a 4 fletch, and because you're using a drop away, you can. Again, clearance. I know the Matthews bows, those cables are very close to those hen vanes going by. When you fletch with a 4 fletch like this, you're going to have a lot more clearance.
Now, what about those pins in the back?
This is a system that I use. It's just a target system. It's a pin. It's a pin that goes in the back.
Why is it better than?
It's more precise. It's easier to change. So when I smash my nocks with my other arrows, if I haven't damaged the pin, I just put a new nock on, and it protects the end of the shaft.
And when you're putting the nock on, though,
it pushes on.
It's just a push on, and you're just making sure that it's is exactly to the degree that you want it to be.
It's indexed properly.
Yeah.
Right.
So will you do that for people if they're coming by to get a string from you? Like, how much do you get into actually arrow building?
I really don't like to anymore. I just had a guy ask me the other day if I do a dozen for him.
Yeah, but like, this is what I want from you now. I want you to build my arrow.
You know, and if I can't, I can certainly recommend a gentleman that I do all my business with at Lancaster Archery. My go-to guy that you can talk to down there. You tell him what you want, they'll build it.
Who is it?
As Josh Remley at Lancaster Archery Supply. He's one of their experts.
I mean, this arrow is just freaking beautiful looking.
Yeah, it's good. And you know, the nice part about having the cresting on the end, the wrap, is, it's bright and they can see it, but I want to know when when it goes through the animal, I want to see where it punches through.
So that's the arrow wrap as well.
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
And arrow wraps don't do anything except for it's not for the flight of the arrow, but it will help you and
visually you want to see where the arrow hits, and once it blows through them,
and it looks cool.
Yeah, you want to be able to find your arrow easier. You know, a lot of guys who use the lighted nocks, but unfortunately, lighted nocks change the weight of your arrow. So if all your arrows in your quiver don't have lighted nocks, now you're shooting a different component, and it affects your impact. So this just helps you see them a little better. If the deer can see this up in my tree stand, I'm screwed anyway. So I'm not worried about it.
Is that one of the things people...
They want
people go,
dark veins, dark nocks, dark everything. Like, if they can see
you're
that,
colorblind, man. They're not going to see that fluorescent.
Even if they're not, just don't move. If you don't move, it's not a problem. Me being able to see where this impacts the animal to tell me the correct response to the hit is more important than anything. I want to know where it hits them so I know what my next move is.
Yep.
You know, if you look on our pages all year, we saw not sure where I hit him. Can't have that. You need to know where you hit them. And if you can up the percentages of that by adding a brighter back end of your arrow, it's going to help. So, yeah.
So just real quick, and we'll wrap it up. Like,
Sure.
you know, a lot of people are watching Hunting Public. They've got some great videos on YouTube. Have you seen them?
No.
You're a YouTube guy, man. Watch the Hunting Public.
Yeah.
They're a group of young hunters. I mean, they're probably around my age. They're in their 30s and some in their 20s, and
Yeah.
they got 10, 20 hunters together, and they document everything.
Really?
They go all over the country. They document everything, and it's really awesome content. And some of them will. There's been a couple episodes where they'll stock up on a buck that they see in a field or something, and there's high grass everywhere, right?
So
Or
they're
a bunch of whips.
out in the plains.
Yeah. Well, no, this was even New York. The one I'm thinking about is New York, and a nice huge buck in this field, and they're getting close to it, and where sometimes they'll have to shoot through grass or through a cattail or something, but they swear that because of the way their arrow is set up, that they're confident in it. It's heavy. It's going to blow through everything. So I want to just pick your brain on like the weight of an arrow.
The whole
is it ever
debate.
kosher to actually shoot through something if you know you're confident in your arrow?
My opinion, I would never. If it was laying on their body, you know, if there was a pine bough laying against their body, yes, sure, because it's on their body. But anything between me and them, I just could never do it. I don't care how heavy the arrow is. It's not a gun. It's not a bullet. My opinion, again, in fact, everything that I've said today is, you know, that's just my way of thinking. The whole heavy arrow debate, our arrows are more than heavy enough to blow through black bear, deer, caribou, elk. I mean, when you get into moose and maybe brown bear, yeah, something a little heavier poundage, heavier kinetic energy. But we have kids shooting 40-pound bows blowing through deer. It's if you just put it in the right spot, you don't need to drive yourself crazy with all these heavy up front. And the reason being is when you put all that weight up front, you're drastically changing the dynamic spine of the arrow. You're putting so much weight up front, you're flexing the hell out of that arrow. It's not, and Tim Gillingham from Gold Tip, I'm sure he's covered it, will be, he's the authority on arrows in my eyes. And you just don't need it. You may tune with it. It certainly quiets your bow down. I know a lot of guys, they get them to fly like darts, but it's not a necessity. You know, you don't have to do it. You don't have to have a heavy arrow. My arrows are, like I said, I think they're 310, somewhere in there, 305 to 310. And the deer I shot this year, I didn't even see it go through them. I mean, how far out of the dirt behind him do you want to pull your arrow?
So, in your opinion, if there's any shit in between
I won't do
you
it.
and the deer, don't do it.
No, I'll never do it. I get razzed a lot for that. Like, I won't even take, I mean, broadside or quartering away, that's about it. Like, I've shot some straight down, and I got them, but I'm glad I did. But everyone, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, you have to take what's given to you for shots. Well, if it isn't perfect, that's what's given to me, myself, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to go through that, them being wounded, them suffering, and, you know, it doesn't mean that much to me that I'm going to take chances. I don't want to ever take chances and hope. You know, it's just like I won't go hunt a bad wind and, well, let's hope they come from the other way. It's not in me to do things that way. I just can't.
Yep.
I just can't do it.
You wait for the perfect condition, and
if it's not, and you know, now with fishing, it's like, oh, there's bad wind today for hunting. Great.
Good wind for fishing.
I'll go fishing instead. You know, it builds my excuse where I can't get yelled at.
That's good.
So,
all right, man. So,
that was great.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Great to do it. Yeah,
so
anytime.
Brian Visco, Viscosity Bowstrings,
sir.
And we'll probably be doing some fishing podcasts.
Sure, I'd love
later
to.
in the year.
And I'm still a greenie. I mean, I'm only like 6 or 7 years in, but I'm very in.
Come on.
I love to talk fishing.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, we'll do it.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
everybody get out there, get your bows tuned. Make sure that you're shooting the right stuff for what your bow's capabilities are, what your draw length is.
Yeah.
Go to a shop, whatever your local pro shop is. Go there. But if you're in Massachusetts, Ryini's is, I mean, hands down, is the number one that I've been recommended. You know, they want me to go interview Chris Ryini. He's the man. He's got an amazing shop. Yeah. I've gone to Jerry's in Milford, and they've been pretty damn good. And who else do you recommend up there, up that way?
The North Shore, Danny Zecker at Big Al's, pretty knowledgeable, good techie. You know, Chris and them, and most of your shops are really just hunters for the most part.
Yeah.
Danny's a hunter,
Yeah.
but he's a techie guy too.
And they want to set you up for the best. You know, they're not doing anything but trying to get you set up to make good shots. So
100%.
Visit your local shops, and that's it. Tune in next week.
Thanks for listening to the Hunt Suburbia podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We're going to release an episode every single Sunday throughout the season, throughout the entire year, and we will possibly be releasing some bonus episodes here and there throughout the week as people, come in freshly off a bow kill and tell their stories. We hope that happens throughout the season. There might be weeks where you get 2 or 3 bonus episodes. You might not get one for a couple of weeks, but there will be some bonus episodes. But you can count on us every single Sunday to have a new interview on throughout the season. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Big bucks I've been dreaming often, every night till I'm in a coffin. Vermont woods to the burbs of Boston, I'm looking for a tree to get lost in. Crisp mornings, little dust in the snow. Quality time, just me and my bow. Fall evenings, I know just where to go for some quality time for me and my bow. It's just me and my